Okay, I have to give you a little history, which is that there was a period of time recently where children in Africa were vaccinated for diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, and the death rate among the vaccinated was much higher for other diseases. And so these doctors said, well, let's look at what happens on a genetic level after we vaccinate a series of children. So today we have the ability to look at these sensitive and sophisticated genetic responses after vaccination. And we're told that vaccines are kind of one size fits all, that we give the same vaccine to everybody, and that everybody will have a similar response, at least to for hopefully being protected against the target. But what we don't hear is what else happens in the rest of the body after a vaccine. And what we can see here is that each one of these is a different girl. There were 8 girls that were vaccinated, and they looked to see genetically what proteins started to be made, because genes make proteins, okay? So after any kind of an intervention or an ingestion, something like this, we can see certain genes becoming activated. And it was, to me, quite alarming to see the different activations that happened. And this is an actual chart from the article, but I broke down, made it a little simpler so we can read it better. But what we found is that there were what I refer to as epigenetic alterations, because it's not a gene mutation, okay? What it is, it's a gene activation. So while we used to think that our genes are our destiny, we now know that they're not our destiny, that only a small % of our genes dictates what happens to us. Our destiny is about what those genes are told to do. And what those genes are told to do has so much to do with what we're exposed to. So we know that, say, smoking, even eating rice can change your epigenetic profile. So any injection is sure to change the epigenetic profile. So what we find here is that and it happens by signaling, so think of the cell as a ball, and think of the genes on the inside of the ball. On the outside of the ball, there are around 2,000 receptors that respond to what's happening in the broth that cell is bathed in. So depending on what's hitting the outside of the cell, be it aluminium or formaldehyde or tetanus toxoid, we will see different signals go into the cell, and different instructions will be given to the genes, which will make protein. Okay, that's how it works. So we see epigenetic alterations resulting in upregulation of genes that are associated with genetic disorders, cardiovascular disease, gastrointestinal disease, immunological disease, connective tissue disorders, developmental disorders. The list was very long, and these girls all responded differently to each other. And also, there are things called cytokines, which are chemicals in the blood that tell your cells how to respond during an infection. And they found that those cytokines were different in different girls as well. So there's a huge difference. If I was to vaccinate each one of you, the list of what genes would be upregulated would be different in each of you. So it's another thing to consider when taking a vaccine, even if the vaccine works, is that so many other things are being changed. Now, most of us seem to get away with this when we're vaccinated, but we don't have any studies looking at the difference between completely vaccinated versus completely not vaccinated and following out for 20, 30, 40 years. We need that. We could do that, actually, because there's a large portion of unvaccinated children in the United States, but our government does not prioritize or have any desire to do such a study. So at this point, we can't say for sure that the vaccines are causing these things, but we have now evidence that they could be, and we can't say that they're not causing them. And we know from toxicology that many of the chemicals that are in there are stirring up the immune system in ways that are not normal. And I'll get into that more in a bit. So this is another study that I will show you from 2008. This was a Swedish study. And they looked at infants after their diphtheria, tetanus, acellular pertussis vaccines. and polio, Hib. So these were babies, and they got the regular vaccines at 3 and 5 months. And then they took some of their blood out and they exposed it to the whooping cough toxin, which is basically what's in the vaccine, okay? And then they looked to see what happened 12 hours later in a genetic level. And what this doctor reported was 33 allergy-related genes were activated, 66 asthma genes were activated, 67 cancer genes were upregulated, and 25 immunological genes were upregulated, okay? So we're definitely seeing on a genetic level some waking up. Now, whether or not it goes through completely and causes these diseases, no, it doesn't in everybody right then and there. But do we know that unless something comes along and shuts these down, what is the result? We don't know. The first study I showed you on the African girls, the conclusion is that the immunological explanation for the non-specific effects, which is what I'm talking about, of vaccines is not known at present.